Hello, ladies and gentlemen, veterans, dedicated VA employees. Thank you again, as always, for coming back to the channel. Let's discuss more VA disability. I am Attorney Matthew Lang, VA accredited attorney. I've got years of experience within the VA disability realm, not only as an attorney, but as a former federal employee for the VA. And on top of that, I am a veteran myself. So for today's topic, I want to address PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is a condition that really profoundly affects many who have served our nation. Veterans, this condition does not only impact your mental well-being, but it can also impact your physical well-being. So what is some of the history of PTSD? Well, we know the psychological impact of war on soldiers has really been documented for centuries. Just may not have been called PTSD. For example, we've got the Civil War. It was known as soldier's heart. World War I, we've got the term shell shock. World War II, we were introduced to battle fatigue or combat exhaustion. So it wasn't really until after the Vietnam War and into about 1980 where PTSD was officially recognized. It was recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is also known as the DSM. We're on the 5th edition, so you may hear me call it the DSM-5. But this acknowledgement was very important in understanding and treating PTSD among veterans. So what is PTSD? Well, it's kind of what it sounds like. PTSD is a mental health condition that develops after experiencing or witnessing a traumatic event. Now, for veterans out there, you will know that these events often occur in your military service. And what these events could be is anything during combat, could be something during a training accident, it could even be military sexual trauma. And we'll discuss a little bit more about that as we go along. So, one thing to keep in mind is while it's normal to have stress reactions after such events, traumatic events, PTSD is really characterized by symptoms that persist for more than a month and interfere with your daily life, work, and relationships, veterans. So let's kind of look at the various traumatic experiences that we kind of talked about there. We've got the combat exposure. Veterans, you may have faced life-threatening situations during a combat. You may have witnessed death. You may have engaged in firefights, for example. We also have the military sexual trauma, where veterans, you may have been sexually assaulted or harassed during service. Training accidents could also be a source of traumatic experience. Could have been severe injuries or deaths during those training accidents that veterans you witnessed. So, even with so many possibilities and of various traumatic experiences, we also have to remember that not all veterans exposed to trauma will develop PTSD. So factors such as the intensity of the trauma, individual resilience, support systems, and prior history will play a significant role. So what are some of those symptoms in veterans that are often manifested in ways that affect both your personal and professional life? Well, we're going to find in 38 CFR Part 4 a list of symptoms that are not all-inclusive that the VA will utilize, and they'll be related to these. But again, remember, this also is not an all-inclusive list. But veterans, you may have intrusive memories. These can be flashbacks of situations, nightmares, or just distressing memories. You could have moments of avoidance where you're going to steer clear of situations, places, or people that really trigger the memory of the trauma. Veterans, you may even experience negative changes in thinking and mood, feelings of guilt, shame, loss of interest in activities once enjoyed, or even feeling detached from others. You may even find hyperarousal and reactivity symptoms, veterans. Things like being easily startled, experiencing outbursts of anger, difficulty sleeping. So these are just a few. But while some individuals exhibit these symptoms or others associated with PTSD immediately following the trauma, we also have to remember that others may not display signs until weeks, months, or even years later. This is really known as delayed onset PTSD, or even delayed expression. So, according to the DSM-5, the delayed expression refers to cases where the full diagnostic criteria are not met until at least 6 months after the traumatic event. And several factors can contribute to this delayed onset. Could be suppression of emotions. Maybe that's, veterans, how you have coped with it. You've pushed it away. You've pushed the thoughts away and the feelings away. There could be triggering events, subsequent life events that occur later on, or new stressors that can really activate the late symptoms. It could just be the cumulative stress, ongoing stress over and over and over as time progresses. We also need to remember, though, that PTSD symptoms can often mimic or overlap with other mental health conditions, which can cause a misdiagnosis or even overlooked diagnosis of PTSD. Depression, anxiety disorders, substance abuse, and even other physical elements such as chronic pain and headaches and gastrointestinal issues, where providers and medical professionals will look at the physical element and not think of the psychological root of the condition. So keeping in mind that PTSD can manifest differently from person to person, but there are common categories and symptoms. Now, the common categories you may hear over time or have already heard is known as intrusive symptoms. Again, we're talking about the flashbacks, the nightmares, and the involuntary memories. We've also got the other group of avoidance behaviors. We've talked about, again, avoiding reminders, emotional numbing. We've also got the group of negative alterations in cognitions and mood. You know, you may have a persistent, veterans, you may have a persistent negative belief, social withdrawal. And then we also have the group of alterations in arousal and reactivity. And that's where we get into the anger and the unprovoked anger and outbursts and always being on edge. Could also be sleep disturbances in there as well. So I'm hoping that has given everybody really an idea of what PTSD is. PTSD is a mental health condition, in short, related to some sort of trauma in service. For veterans, in this case, for VA disability. It can definitely impact other body systems. It can definitely have a multitude of symptoms, and it can definitely be delayed in onset. It can even be misdiagnosed. Maybe it doesn't quite meet the criteria as it's onsetting. Maybe it is just the signs of alcohol abuse or depression early on. And those are things to keep in mind. Veterans, PTSD can definitely be a condition that we don't want to accept all the time. but it doesn't hurt to go get it checked out, get treatment if you think you have it, or if somebody thinks you may have it. But now let's move this to your VA disability claim, veterans. Let's give you an idea, a walkthrough, essentially. I think I've seen that in another video where the walkthrough is definitely appreciated. And you're going to find in the PTSD claim that it's going to be fairly similar. Now, there may be some additional evidence pieces that can be used in the process, just because in many cases, PTSD stressors aren't always documented. And so we have to look towards other pieces of evidence to help find the proof for that stressor. So let's take it this way, veterans. Let's say you file your VA form 21-526EZ for the first time filing PTSD. What I'm going to call for short 526 is going to ask for a little bit of information about where your PTSD occurred, and you can easily say easing fear or fear for your life. You experienced combat. You served in a combat zone. You can mark MST right behind it. Whatever the stressor is, you can do that brief description there. You can go ahead and just submit that in to the VA, and their duty to assist is going to really kick off. And you can let them go through what they've got to do. My recommendation would be is if you happen to have some evidence right away, or just be able to fill out certain stressor statements, as we call it, and I'll discuss that a little bit more here in a minute, or even get other buddy statements ahead of time, or other medical documents that you may have from treatment, and provide those as well. I think that could definitely benefit your claim. But again, everybody's facts are different, and I'm not here to tell you how to do your claim in the process, as I can't advise to anything, as I don't know all your facts. Just as an educational consideration, it may not hurt. So veterans, you filed this, and here's the other evidence that's going to really be looked for. So the VA is going to dig through a series of evidence. VA is already going to have to automatically get your service treatment records. That just comes with every claim. VA should also likely go get your military personnel records as well. VA will likely request any sort of stressor statement from you. There's a specific form that is used for that now, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on that form. Veterans, you can type it up. You can write it on a piece of notebook paper or whatever you got to do, but know that there is a specific form for it that they may mail you. This form will cover military sexual trauma, MST. It'll cover any personal traumas, any combat-related traumas, non-combat-related traumas. The form now fits supposed to fit every category. So you can put down, even if you have more than one stressor, say you have an MST stressor and a combat stressor, you can put them both down there. Now, that may be a difficult part for many to do, as you now have to discuss some of what have occurred, and you may be kind of doing that evasive way of treatment, I'll say, self-treatment. But no, it's important to give some information. The VA is really trying to connect all the dots for you. So you gotta, you've got to help them out. It's not unfortunate. It's just really a necessity. So you're going to get the stressor there. The VA may even send you in that letter asking you for any treatment records you may have. Maybe you've got treatment records from the VA medical centers, clinics. So you've got your treatment through there. VA is going to be able to pull those from their disability office over typically. But I would definitely identify those as well. So we're really going to, from the VA perspective, we're really going to go through and look at all this evidence here. We're going to take veterans what your stressor is. We're going to need your statement. If you got buddy statements, like I said, not everything is documented, unfortunately. If you got buddy statements that can help as witnesses to the events, that can definitely help support the stressors, especially things like personal trauma or non-combat related stuff, training exercises, even MST. The idea here is that we want to have as much evidence as is really possible, just in case something is not documented for you. Now, there is a little piece in the MST rules that do make that a little bit easier for the VA. So they, as veterans, you give a little description of that. They're going to be able to go through your personnel records, and what they're looking for many times is some sort of change in behavior. Maybe suddenly you were in trouble all the time. You got Article 15s or you something of the sorts. Maybe you have even your work performance declined somewhere in your evaluations, or you're clearly requesting some sort of transfer or change of station, duty station around the time period of the event. So all this evidence is going to play a role in everything. At some point, veterans, you're going to also be asked to do a VA examination. The VA examination's purpose is really for multiple things. If you don't have any diagnosis of PTSD at the time of the claim, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The VA examination may do that for you. The VA examination is also going to help provide that nexus, that link element, and it's also going to help provide the VA with information on what evaluation to assign when they do grant the service connection of your PTSD. There's going to be a lot of movement back there. There's going to be some other things I haven't really mentioned, but it's just know veterans, in the most part, this is the evidence in general of what's being looked for. There's a lot that's going to be requested, a lot that's going to be done in the background. In the end, again, it's going to go to that decision maker, that RVSR, as we've mentioned before in other videos, who's going to make that decision and that call on your claim there. So I hope you kind of heard, I guess, out of my description there, that there's still that 3 elements that we're always working for on service connection. So the evidence is still going to prove that current diagnosis, needs to prove that in-service event or occurrence, or in this case a stressor, and then that link between them all. And then we go to that decision phase again. And veterans, here's my self-plug again. If you are denied and you don't feel you should have been, please feel free to go to my website, veteranlang.com. Click on my case evaluation button there. We'll schedule a call. We'll chat and see what I can do for you. And know that you do have other options out there as well. If you want to seek out a VSO, a veteran service organization, or you want to seek out another accredited attorney or another accredited agent, that's totally fine too. Just if you've been denied, I recommend you seek out the additional help and representation, because we're going to have a better idea of what has occurred by reading those letters and reading those decisions. And if I sign you up as a veteran that I'm going to represent, and I'm here going to assist you, I'll also have information that you won't be able to see that's locked inside the VA's system that will also help me guide you through your claim. With that, I thank everybody again for watching another video.